Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Welcome, one and all, to the SB Nation NFL show. Specifically, welcome to Monday Football Monday. A reminder before we keep going that this show is brought to you by our friends at DraftKings. DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and use code SBNFL for a special offer when you sign up. That is code SBNFL only at DraftKings Sportsbook. It is Monday, June the 5th, 2023. It is mini camp season, so we have all sorts of things happening across the NFL. Yes, even in the month of June, so make sure to stay tuned to your favorite SB Nation NFL team site. My name is Arjo Ochoa from SB Nation's Blog and the Boys. The fantastic Rachel Prevet from SB Nation's Bleeding Green Nation is on the ones and twos, and with me in the co-pilot chair from SB Nation's Pride of Detroit, it is Jeremy Reisman who delivered on his jambalaya promise. You sent us the pictures over the weekend. Congratulations to you, Jeremy, on what was surely a delicious meal.
It sure was. And congratulations, not just to me on Saturday when I had it, but for the next 4 or 5 days when I will continue to eat leftover jambalaya. And it's one of those meals that, like, the leftovers feel like they're even better because those flavors of, I don't know, like 20 ingredients are all just kind of melding together right now. It's great.
Are you like, what's the storage situation? Are you a Tupperware or like a plastic bag person for this? Like a Ziploc?
Plastic, is that a thing? Plastic bag? I got Tupperware. I didn't know you can store things in like a, you mean like a Ziploc?
Yeah, that's I said. I even specified. That's a brand. They're not a sponsor of ours, but like it's one of those brands that like became the noun. Like a Starbucks is like a
Kleenex.
Coffee. Yeah, exactly. But so do you? What, like, is there any kind of leftover you store in a Ziploc bag?
Not really. Like, if I like getting the blocks of cheese rather than the shredded cheese itself. And so, like, if I open up those and don't use the whole thing, I'll put that in a Ziploc.
Yeah, but I think that something like that, you got to go like a little bit of foil around it first, like, you know what I mean, like just be safe, and then put it in the bag so you like trap the smell.
Yes.
You know, so you're also courteous to everyone around you. You know what I'm saying? Sure. You and Rachel were talking about music when I jumped on. Did she tell you that myself, Brandon Gowden, and her created a playlist for the NFC's mixtape, which is a joint venture that we do at Blog on the Boys and Bleeding Green? I know you're familiar with it. The NFC mixtape is like a world-renowned thing. But so our goal and our mission every week is to each add a song. So we each added a song last week for the first time to this playlist. It's accessible on Apple Music. I think BLG was going to handle the Spotify stuff. Rachel, we might want to check on that. But anyway, I added Stop by the Spice Girls, which was kind of an homage to Rachel after what she told us about the Spice Girls stuff. And Brandon added Reptilia by the Strokes. And Rachel added Ain't It Fun by Paramore. So I wanted you to pick which of those songs was the best.
I honestly have to go by the artist because just by the titles, I'm not sure I know any of those songs, if I'm going to be completely honest.
Wow. Okay. So
I do like the Strokes, though. So I think that would probably be my choice.
If you like the Strokes and you haven't heard the song Reptilia, I feel like that's one of their, like, you know, that's like, oh yeah, I like Michael Jackson, but I've never heard of Thriller. Like, that's kind of the equivalent of what you're saying.
Is that one of those songs that, like, do they say the word Reptilia in it? Because if they don't, then I don't know what song it is. Like, I have a very, very tough time with song titles, and so
I don't think they do. But you have identified a lot of my pet peeves that most people don't pick up on. Like, when it bothers me that, like, when a lot of people jump onto something, it bothers me in movies when people say the title. Like, I really am not a fan of that. Like, that's a stupid thing. Don't ever do that in a movie.
So I'm a big fan of the show Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which just ended last week, and they at like very near the end of the episode, they introduce her for the first time as the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I cringed, and I did not like. It was a beautiful finale, but that part, I wish they wouldn't have done that. It made me cringe so hard.
Yeah, like if it's, I don't know, like the show Succession, if at one point somebody had been like, yeah, what's the succession plan? If you say it like that, you know what I mean? Like, it's okay. Sure. But if you're like, you know, what are we talking about here? We're talking about succession. Nah, it's too stupid.
Right.
Like,
if they would have ended the finale, and so is the succession, like, that would have been awful.
Yeah. I would have loved to, like, stick with the cliche of this if How I Met Your Mother had ended with, like, and that's how I met your mother, but that ended horribly, and we don't have to, like, revisit that and reopen some old wounds. Is that a show you've never seen too? How I Met Your Mother?
Yeah, it is. In fact, it is, because listen, I am not a fan of network comedies in general. They're out, especially if they're like the multicam type. Like, I'm sorry, I couldn't get with it.
Wow. Well, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is an Amazon Prime function.
It's true.
So Jeremy just supports the NFL and Thursday Night Football. It's really
That's
what
right.
this is all about.
Man, what a segue that is.
Wow, I know. Shout out to me. Today, Jeremy, because it's the start of minicamp week, but because it's the start, we don't have anything to discuss from it yet. So we're just going to kind of be doom and gloom. And in the spirit of that, like be cellar dwellers, a life you're well accustomed to as a Detroit Lions fan. And so, hey, it is what it is. Today, we're going to do something that nobody ever does, which is always the theme of Monday Football Monday. And we're going to look at all of the 8 last place finishers in last year's, obviously, NFL season. And we're going to rank them in order of most likely to go from worst to first or whatever. We can go in ascending order if you would like. But we're going to look at basically all 8 of those teams. So do you have a list? Are we going to compile this together? Are you going to write it? Or are you going to take notes? Like what's going to happen here?
I have a full list. If we can go team by team and say where you would rank them, or we can just go bottom to top for my list or top to bottom. Whatever.
I think we should build the list together. Like it has to be a consensus list. So the eight teams on the 4 on the NFC side, the Washington Commanders finished last in the NFC East. The Chicago Bears, the best team in the NFC North, finished last. Obviously held the number 1 overall pick. The Atlanta Falcons in the NFC South. The Arizona Cardinals. I got a feeling we're going to be talking about them pretty soon if we're going in ascending order. New York Jets is going to be a lot of people's hot pick, I think, to go from worst to first, obviously because of Aaron Rodgers. The Cleveland Browns, the Houston Texans, and finally the Denver Broncos in what could only be deemed was the worst season of all time, possibly ever, from any NFL team that has ever existed. But yeah, there's always, I don't know if you know how many years in a row we've had a worst to first team, but it's not like uncommon. Like it's like 9 or 10 years in a row we've had a team go from worst to first.
Yeah, that leaves hope springing eternal for all of the bottom dwellers, which is yes, I have had a lot of experience in that field as a Detroit Lions fan. They almost did they came pretty close to doing it last year. But yeah, it's more common than you would certainly think, and I don't know if I really think any of these 8 are going to do it, but I certainly could see probably 2 of them at least actually doing it.
Just to be clear, the team who did it last year was not the Detroit Lions. It was the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're the team who checked the box. So who will it be this year? I do think we should go in ascending order, kind of build the hype. This is the team we think is the least likely to accomplish this. And we agree that it's the Arizona Cardinals, right? Like there's not a debate here.
It's not even close, but
they stink.
Yeah, they're tanking-ish, right? Like I feel like it's almost fair to say that. I know there's no real such thing as that when they're playing the football games. When it comes to building a team, I think you can tank a football team, and I think that's kind of what the Arizona Cardinals are doing right now. I also did a little bit of homework, RJ, and since DraftKings is our sponsor, I do have corresponding odds for each to win the division, and the Cardinals are by far the furthest at plus 2,500. So yeah, I don't think there's a shot.
What's amazing about that is like their division isn't like stout. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, well, they play in the same division as like X, Y, and Z. Like their division's kind of awful. Like I think we'll obviously predict the divisions as we get closer to the season. But like right now, my money's on the Seahawks. But like, would it shock either of us if the Niners won it? No. I mean, would it be stunning if the Rams got their act together? Maybe not stunning, but it would be a mild surprise. But like that division is like there for the taking to a large degree. If your biggest, impediment right now on paper is Geno Smith Seahawks, all due respect, I mean, like it's there, and that the Cardinals can't get it together is pretty embarrassing for them.
Yeah. I would say yes and no there, because I mean, we all know the NFC in general is not that impressive. I would argue that the 49ers and the Seahawks could arguably be 2 top 5 teams in the conference. Like I think there's that much of a contender, but again, that maybe more speaks to just how weak the NFC in general is. That I think there are other worse divisions in the NFC, and a couple of those teams are probably going to be a little bit higher on our list here.
I think that's really fair to say. I think right now the top 5 teams in the NFC are probably the 2 you just mentioned, the Eagles and the Cowboys, and then probably the Lions. That's it. Like those are your 5.
Right.
And so, but still, like these 2, like not to like hype up the Cowboys and Eagles again. Shout out to the NFC's mixtape, but like it feels like the Cowboys and Eagles are built on really firm foundations, but the Niners are built on this like loose quarterback, like Kyle Shanahan magic, and like. At some point, like, is that ever going to run out? And the Seahawks, again, were a revelation last year, but like, was that a flash in the pan? Like, I do feel like they're more loose in terms of overall stability. The Cardinals, though, like, I really hate the Cardinals. Like, I'm starting to really kind of come around on this. Like, nothing they do, like, name a Cardinals legend. besides Larry Fitzgerald, like a player
No.
they drafted that is like, I think it's one of the most embarrassing things of all time that Carson Palmer's in the Ring of Honor. Like that is, they are such an embarrassing franchise. Like all they do is take like other people's like good players and try to pretend they're their own. Like with Carson, JJ Watt recently. I mean, like you're just not like, they're not real. Like what have the Cardinals ever done that you have found to be impressive ever?
Are you trying to disparage the name of Cardinals legend Emmitt Smith?
Why would you do this? Like, why would you, he was better than Barry Sanders. I know that bothers you.
Okay.
Deep
All
down.
right. I should have known if I poked the bear, he would just come out in straight lion.
But yeah, like that, Emmett's another example of like, we're just going to take other people's legends and like put our uniform on them. Their uniforms stink. Like they had a horrible uniform reveal, like nothing about them. And that's not even like bagging on Jonathan Gannon like a lot of people want to. Like I'm not diving in on that, but that's its own sort of rabbit hole. Like what do they have going on that you are jealous of? Nothing.
No. I like their stadium. Their stadium's pretty cool, and I like the indoor grass. Like that's cool.
Well, they roll it out, and that grass actually was under a lot of scrutiny last year, like in the Super Bowl. So like everybody actually hates that grass.
So, it's typically very good, but bad year for it. So yeah, everything is wrong with it. They're tanking their turf at this point too. So
right. Okay. So we agree the Cardinals are 8th on this list. Who do you have as number 7?
I have the Commanders, and it's not really a condemnation of them. I think they're going to be a fine team, but it's the toughest division in the NFC. It's I could honestly see all 3 other teams winning that division. And when you have that competitive division, I hate to be so reductive, but it comes down to your quarterbacks. And Sam Howell is not even close to the level of the other 3 quarterbacks in this division. So, I mean, I think they could be a 500 ball club, but I think the winner of that division is going to be like a 12-win team. So I don't think they've got a very good shot. Vegas doesn't either. The DraftKings odds are plus 1,100, which are the second worst amongst all 8 of these teams. So that's who I have as my 7. What do you think about that?
So they had the most wins of any last place team last year. So they're technically the best of them. But I agree with you. Like they were kind of, I don't want to say stuck, but like, they were 7-5 at one point last year. Brandon and I actually talked about that last week on the mixtape. I mean, they had some things going for them, but you're right. Like, I mean, like, is Sam Howell an improvement from Taylor Heineke? Like at best, it feels like they made a lateral movement. Like, and maybe it's a positive step from like a financial contractual standpoint because he's on the second year of his rookie contract or whatever. But like, they are like floundering and treading water at the most important position in the game. And I mean, outside of RG3's rookie year, I mean, what like I respect Kirk Cousins a lot, which is gotten me in some hot water. But I mean, they have not really had sustained quarterback play ever, like in the 21st century, and so that's just like their bugaboo. I really like their offense. I love Terry McLaurin. Jahan Dotson, I feel like was a little bit slept on as a rookie. Brian Robinson's story obviously was super impressive. I mean, that doesn't even encapsulate what it was. Their defense is really good. I mean, I don't really believe in Ron Rivera, but you're right. I think this is a matter of like the mountain's just too steep to climb. I mean, the other 3 teams were all in the divisional round last year. Like literally the other 3 teams all won at least one playoff game. And one was knocked out by another one in the Giants and the Eagles. And so it's impossible. I mean, I think they might be the best or maybe not the best. That's not fair to say with Aaron Rodgers joining the Jets, but they're one of the better teams of this group of 8 that we're talking about. But I agree with you. The road is just too difficult.
Yeah. The one thing that is kind of the big question mark that if it works out in their favor, like maybe they're in this conversation is Eric Bieniemy, right?
Yep.
That was their big offseason addition. You want to talk about building an offense to kind of go with that improved defense. I think Bieniemy is kind of the key to that, but he's very much an unknown, right? Is there a legitimate reason why he's gone this long to become an offensive coordinator or become a head coach, or was he always just kind of an Andy Reid disciple? So I still think I'm searching for ways to make them win the division. It just seems like too high of a mountain to climb.
I do think the darkest part of the night is over for them with the ownership change, and things like that. But it's a process. I mean, it's not going to happen here in 2023. They'll probably have a new head coach next season, and maybe in 2025 or something, we're talking about this team restoring a little bit of order. But this team, correct me if I'm wrong, once upon a time won the Super Bowl in Detroit. Is that correct? They won it in the old Silverdome. Pontiac
Oh
Silverdome.
man, you're testing my Detroit knowledge here. It's really Pontiac knowledge. I don't know. Maybe. Sure. We'll go with yes. I don't tend to know who won Super Bowls very often as a Lions fan.
Am I alive? Do you hear me?
I hear you now. I didn't hear you before.
My visual was buffering. I had some internet stability issues. I don't know, like if everything's collapsing around me. I think I'm fine.
You're good now. You're
so
good.
okay. Well, I was hating on the Silverdome it's dumb. Detroit's dumb. It has that big tire that just lives on the side of the highway or whatever. Like, I don't know why. Like, who needs it? Okay, are we ready for number 6?
Yeah, you want to go with this one?
Yeah, I do. I'm doing evens, right. You're doing odds. That's what we were kind of going back and forth here. Until we have a disagreement, I guess. But sure. We're in agreement on 8 and 7. I think number 6 for me, similar, like kind of bouncing or piggybacking off of your logic, is the Denver Broncos. It's just too difficult of a road to hoe for them. You're not dethroning the Chiefs. I'm sorry. And I don't believe in the Chargers as much as most people. I've been well on record about that, but I don't believe in Sean Payton. If Sean Payton were the head coach of the Cowboys instead of the Broncos, like, he would not be getting this, like, glow up. You know what I mean? People are like,
right.
Like people are taking the like stupid low hanging fruit things that Sean Payton's doing with the Broncos and like they're in love with them. Like, what was the reason that he cut Brandon McManus? Was like, what was the like reported reason? Was like, I don't want my kicker to talk or whatever. Like all these like silly tropey, coach speak loser things like that, people make a big deal of. If that were happening anywhere else, but I don't know if you agree with me. The Broncos are like a chosen team of like football media. Like football media loves the Broncos and loves to kind of smile upon them. So this really worked for Sean Payton's image. Aside from the disaster off the field, just from a narrative standpoint, Russell Wilson is kind of broken. Like that was true in Seattle. Like that was, there's a lot of data to support this. And so I just don't believe. I'm sorry. I really am not in on this in a lot of ways. And they have a less difficult road, I suppose, than the Commanders, in that not every team is super formidable, but they have to go through the reigning world champions and Patrick Mahomes. It's not happening. Have they ever beaten Patrick Mahomes? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably not. This would be a good time to ask Pete that. But yeah, the Broncos were around number 6 as well. They got plus 550 odds, which is actually the 5th best odds amongst these 8 teams to win their division. But I'm with you. Obviously, the defense is still going to be very, very good. They didn't lose a lot of players on that side of the ball, so they'll be a competitive football team. They'll be, again, one of these kind of 500 football teams, but you're in the division with the Chiefs. You're in the division with, I think, a Chargers team that might rebound this year. And as much as Sean Payton might help the offense, as much as you might think pairing him with Russell Wilson is going to rebound his career, that offensive line is still dreadful. And as much as Russell Wilson can do kind of a lot outside of the tackle box there, that part of his game is dwindling, right? And he's a guy that also holds onto the ball way too long. And so I think his sack numbers are going to continue to stay extremely high. And if that's the case, that offense is still going to look really, really bad in a lot of spots, even though I really do like some of their weapons there. Like Jerry Jeudy is a stud. But yeah, I just think the mountain's a little too high to climb in that division. And it's going to take a while. Like you're learning a new offense. That sort of stuff doesn't just click right away, especially with a quarterback that is coming off the year that Russell Wilson is.
Patrick Mahomes has started 11 games against the Broncos. That's 5 years worth. And then if you recall, week 17, his rookie year, when the Chiefs had clinched and they let him start, just to kind of like let the rookie play and whatever. And that was when everyone got excited. What do you think his record is in 11 games, 11 starts against the Broncos?
10-1.
11-0. That's just,
so he even won the throwing game at the end.
I mean, it's just insane that like, he's been the quarterback for 5 years, like half a decade, and they've never beaten him. That's just, I mean,
that's crazy.
It's really stupid and sad. Is he the best quarterback ever in the AFC West, like history?
Yeah.
Already? Yeah. Like, I mean, he's past Elway.
Sorry, John Elway. Yeah. Like I do. He's already. I mean, if we weren't just coming off the tails of Tom Brady, he'd already be in the GOAT discussion.
I mean, I don't like 100% disagree. I think he's well on path. Like, I mean, if things are even like mildly sustainable for him or sustained, then easily. But he's already tied he has tied the record for most Super Bowl wins by a quarterback in division's history. So, just insane. But anyway, Broncos, you stink. So, whatever. I'm just like, I'm so out on the Broncos too. Like, I don't, like, I actually think that the Broncos, like, the greatest thing that has ever happened to them is the drafting of John Elway, because like it was John Elway's like cachet that lured Peyton Manning in 2012. Like, if not for that, they would have been stuck. You know what I mean? Like, and so like the greatest thing they've ever done is like draft John Elway and like let it work out, for the last 25 years or whatever. But like they've just been riding those coattails. Like, be a real NFL team, Broncos. So I like the city of Denver. I think it's all cool and stuff, but like the Broncos just kind of like miss me with this. By the way, it really looked poorly on Russell Wilson last week. That story that came out that like he chose not to go to Philly and wanted to go to Denver. Maybe Russell Wilson's not a great roster evaluator. So who knows? But that was number 6. Who's number 5 and why?
I have it as the Houston Texans. Maybe the worst team outside of the Cardinals in this bunch. But in an AFC South that's not very competitive. I don't like the Titans at all. I don't like the Colts at all. I think both those teams could be bottom 5 teams. But you got the Jaguars, and the Jaguars are, I think, a legit team. Obviously, they still have a little bit more to prove, but they finished on a hot note. I don't see any reason to see them regress this season. As for the Texans, like, how far can you go on a rookie quarterback? Like, this isn't a team built like the Mark Sanchez Jets of the olden days where he can immediately take them to the AFC Championship game. I think they still have a lot to do to really fix that team. But to me, it's more about, I think, again, it's about the division around them than the team itself. Like, I think this is a team that's on the rise. I think this is a team that could be, as soon as next year, in the discussion to win the division. But I think just we're a year early on the Texans. They obviously made a lot of big plays, obviously adding Will Anderson as well in the draft to build for the future, but to expect all of your rookies to immediately take you to a division title, where the Jaguars are probably 2 or 3 years already ahead of you on that build, just doesn't seem like it's going to happen this year.
I disagree a bit, and it's really not about a belief in the Texans as much as it's a lack of belief in the AFC South. I think we're on the same page. Titans, Colts, you stink. The Jaguars, to me, these were their 9 wins last year. Okay, they beat the Colts 24-0 in the early parts of the season, which I really enjoyed because that was Matt Ryan and everybody falling apart. They won in LA, if you recall. They blasted them. That was really early. They won 38-10. Okay, but also kind of a fraud team. And then they lost 5 games in a row, and they beat the Raiders. Again, not really like a badge of honor. They beat the Ravens when the Ravens were kind of really struggling. And you remember that was the weird collapse at the end. They won that game 28-27. They won in Tennessee, again, a team we don't believe in. They overcame a 14-point deficit to beat the Cowboys in overtime on a pick 6 that a Cowboys wide receiver in Noah Brown just dropped. Although Noah Brown is now a member of the Houston Texans. Maybe that works out with the division. Then they beat the Jets in December when the Jets had already kind of like, they were really running on fumes off of their little run.
They did not win a game in December or later.
Right. Then they won in Houston, the Jaguars did. But again, at that point, we were like, are the Texans tanking, whatever? And then they beat the Titans in that Sunday Night Football Week 18 win in your in game. And then, cool, they overcame the drought and beat the Chargers, who are like the king of being frauds. You know what I mean? So like, I just don't like put a lot of like legitimacy in what they did. I don't mean to take away from. I really believe in Trevor Lawrence, friend of the SB Nation NFL, Trevor Lawrence, by the way. I believe in Doug Peterson, but like I could totally see regression happening here. Like, I mean, so I'm kind of willing to buy in a little bit to the Texans, but I would put them above the Browns, and some of that is like the Texans have a much easier path than I think the Browns do towards winning.
I agree. Yeah, and the Browns are my number 4 team. We can get to them in a second here. But yeah, I guess to me, Jacksonville did what you're supposed to do as a rising team, which is just beat bad teams. The next step is then to build your resume and start beating some better teams. Fact of the matter, though, is to win the division, the Jacksonville Jaguars are not going to have to beat up any big teams. They can just beat up on the division, including, I think, the Texans, and walk into the playoffs again. So I get like, the Jaguars still have to prove themselves. I'm not putting them in the top 5 of the AFC at this point at all. But when you have kind of a cake division, when you're trending in the right direction, it's hard for me to look at their wins over bad teams as a fluke. Like, they should have beat those teams. They'll continue to beat those teams. It's just whether they'll make that next step or not is really the question. To me, it's not more regression. It's, are you plateauing or are you getting better? And even a plateaued Jacksonville team, I think, is better than a Texans team that's just getting started.
This is Houston's schedule. They start off at Baltimore. I think we'd probably pick the Ravens to win that game, but like, sure, you never know. But fine, say they drop it. They get the Colts in week 2. Okay, that's a pretty, and like, DeMeco Ryans is a huge important factor here, right? Like arguably the best head coaching candidate of the cycle, landed in Houston. Then they go to Jacksonville. Again, if that goes the Texans' way here, that sort of serves my point. They get the Steelers. You and I both believe in the Steelers, but that is a bit of a touch and go proposition. They're at Atlanta. Then they get New Orleans before the bye. They play the NFC South, which is a huge boost for the Texans here. And the Jaguars to the point.
Right.
I mean, but like, that's my point. Like, I think the Texans belong ahead of the Browns in this exercise. Like, so I think
that's
like, I agree with you that like, so let's put the Browns at 5 and the Texans at 4. I think that's a fair kind of way to do it. You messed up. You're stupid. So that sucks.
Well, to be fair, DraftKings odds, Texans are plus 700 to win the division. Browns are plus 425.
Was this Jeremy Reisman's list or DraftKings' list? Because like, who's doing the work?
No, I'm just saying, like, if you're calling me dumb, you might be calling some other people that sponsored the show dumb, and I don't know if you want to do that.
I think they're beautiful and wonderful and handsome and glamorous. But the Browns do have the Steelers are really, again, you and I believe in them. The Ravens, Rachel, remember this, I love. The Bengals are obviously, well established at this point in time. I know that the Browns are whatever, but like, do we really like, is this gonna work? Like, are the Browns gonna show up and like win the division? Like, I don't think so. I mean, I don't believe in this whatsoever. Like, I don't like just talking about football, which should not be the point here, but like, I don't believe in Deshaun Watson. I know he had the glamorous, whatever it was, 2019 season, or did he lead the NFL in passing in 2020 was the year he sat out, but in 2019, I think he led the NFL in passing. Like, that means nothing to me. Like, I just, that they are not, like, I was never wildly impressed with him in Houston. But we also, like, we assign like these chokes and things like that to certain players. I've said before, I can't believe we don't talk about the Chiefs blowing the AFC title game to the Bengals. But when the Texans blew that huge lead to the Chiefs in the divisional round in 2019, we only hype the Chiefs up for that. We give no fault. We give Bill O'Brien the fault, but we give none to Deshaun Watson from just, again, a football standpoint.
Yeah, it's tough because I do think the Browns on paper, and they've been this way for the past 3 or 4 years, are a good football team. They were 11th in DVOA last year, so it's not like they were a disaster. And Deshaun Watson, I don't know. Like, I think he's definitely more up in the air than a lot of people give him credit for. I think some people think he belongs in the top 5 conversation when everything is rolling, and that's way obviously premature. I think even before, the down year last year with Cleveland, but at the same time, like, give him time in a second year of an offense with Stefanski. Like, there's certainly an opportunity for him to bounce back this year. And the defense is good, really good, and got even better this offseason with the addition of Dalvin Tomlinson. But yeah, I mean, this might be the toughest division in football because, again, this is another one where I'm like, I could see any of these guys winning it. Steelers, I almost give the Browns a little bit better of a chance than the Steelers in winning this division, just because I think from top to bottom, they're a better football team. The problem is, like, and I hate doing this as a fan of the Lions. It's like, there's part of you that's just like, but they're the Browns. And that's not a good argument to make. That's not a real football argument to make, but at the same time, like, this is a team that's had a really good roster for the past 3 or 4 years and they've done nothing with it. And so part of me is just like, okay, well, what's different this year? And I don't really have a good answer for that.
I agree with you. It's like low hanging fruit to say, like, oh, they're the same old Lions, same old Browns, like same old Cowboys. But like, something to go back to the mixtape that we talk about a lot is like, well, the NFC East hasn't had a repeat winner since 2004. Like, does that have anything to do with who the teams are in 2023? No, but like, it's like the measurement or the quantity of it is like a non-zero thing. You know what I mean? Like, it might be like incredibly minuscule, like a 1/100th of a percentage, but like, it does feel like a non-zero thing. Again, like, back to my Deshaun point to kind of like add to this point, I guess. So he has played in 6 games over the last 2 years because he sat out the entire 2021 season. It was that 2020 season where he led the NFL in passing, 4,800 yards, 33 touchdowns. That is the only season in his, if you want to call it 5-year, but 6-year career where he has had at least 30 touchdowns. Prior to that, his career high was 26 in both 2018 and 2019. His incredible year of 2020, which, by the way, got him the extension in Houston, I believe. It might have come before then, actually. No, it was after that 2020 season. But he had 7 interceptions. He threw 5 in just 6 games. I mean, so again, I don't even really, again, if we're just talking about the football here, which is not cool, but just the football, I don't believe in the player that much. I think he had an amazing 2020 year that he parlayed into 2 wild contracts, like along with the fact that quarterbacks are the all coveted thing, which the Browns exemplified last year. Like, I don't believe. I also don't believe in the like surrounding cast. There was a time where the Browns roster on offense felt loaded. Like it did feel a quarterback way. I love Amari Cooper. I'm still incredibly bitter about that. But like, do we really like Nick Chubb is great, but we're really banking on a running back here being the like engine that saves this offense? You know, like what are the Browns' best receiving options outside of Amari Cooper? Presuming they don't land DeAndre Hopkins.
Njoku, maybe.
I mean, they paid a tight end, which is also a cardinal sin in today's NFL. I mean,
Sure.
you know, it's just, I don't believe. I mean, they have maybe a defensive player of the year candidate, and not even maybe, certainly a defensive player of the year candidate in Myles Garrett, but like that can only go so far. I just, you know, I wouldn't be stunned if this is like the final year for Kevin Stefanski, which would leave, presuming Ron Rivera is gone, Mike McCarthy is the final coach standing from the 2020 cycle. But you never know. Okay, so that leaves the Browns at 5 and the Texans at 4.
That's
so we've made it to the top 3, and the final 3 left standing are the New York Jets, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Chicago Bears. Wow, look at that. The NFC stinks, which is, you know, indicated here by the fact that 2 of the teams are left standing. You were doing odds, I was doing evens. You said that you could see 2 teams doing it. Can I guess who your number 3 is in?
Yes.
I have to believe that your third team is tough because I think we both have the same number 1. But I think the Falcons and the Bears are the same argument. Like, I think both teams are in no disrespect. A lot of my disrespect to the Lions is intended. This is not intended. Like, due to being in really winnable divisions. Like it does.
Yes.
If you look at the 6 non-Falcons Bears teams between the North and the South, I was going to call it the Sorth, which I guess maybe is a way to do that. I mean, like the Lions are the best team. The Vikings, I guess, are the second best team. So I guess that would leave the Bears with the most difficult path. They're probably your number 3 team.
They are my number 3 team.
Yeah.
You nailed it. They got a plus 440 chance to win the division per DraftKings, which is both behind the Lions and the Vikings, as you mentioned. I'm actually very low on the Vikings. I think they could be one of the worst teams in the NFC. But the Bears, I mean, they're one of just those high variance teams this year where I could see them winning 10 games. I could see them winning 5. Or anything in between. And they've done a good job this offseason. Really, I think the best thing they've done this offseason is develop weapons around Justin Fields. And that includes pass protection, right? They add Nate Davis in free agency. They draft Darnell Wright in the first round. That's so key because I look at it like when I try to convince Lions fans that they should be at least mildly scared of the Bears, this is the argument I use. Jared Goff was horrible in 2021. Because he didn't have any weapons, because the offensive line had a bunch of injuries to it early on. Well, now Justin Fields finally has some weapons, right? Gets DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney's pretty good, Chase Claypool's all right. They boost up the offensive line. Now I'm not saying Justin Fields is going to be great, but now you can finally properly evaluate him as a passing quarterback. We already know he's a pretty darn good weapon in the running game. So their offense could take a jump this year. I top 5, no. But top half of the league, yes, which would be a pretty huge swing for them, even though they were such a good running team last year. I think the defense is still very much a mess. They invested in off-ball linebackers. Their defensive line is not good. Their secondary is young and unproven, but could be good. So, you know, it all kind of has to fall the right way for them to have an opportunity to do this. I just don't think it's going to happen this year. Again, it feels like, much like I would say, you know, the Jacksonville Jaguars and Houston Texans. I think the Lions are the Jaguars in that analogy. The Bears are the Texans, where they're a year or 2 behind the Lions in their rebuild, but they're going to be in this conversation very, very soon.
The Navy helmeted team is right behind the cat-like mascot team.
Beautiful.
Just like in the AFC South. Who is the team in the, like, where do the Bears fall in your like threat level within the NFC North? Like, are they do you view them as like the highest threat to the Lions?
I think it's between them and the Packers, right?
Wow, the
To me,
Vikings disrespect. Jeez.
listen, if I had to rank the NFC right now, I think it's Lions, Packers,
NFC North.
I'm sorry, NFC North.
Yeah.
Lions, Packers, Bears, Vikings, and I do think some people are sleeping on the Packers at least a little bit here. Like,
Why? Why are we sleeping on the Packers? Like,
it's not like Aaron Rodgers was out of this world last year, right? Like he was just kind of okay. Their defense is pretty good. Their run game is pretty good. So if Jordan Love can just be average, I think this team is still going to be competitive.
I find it amazing, by the way, and this is my Cowboys bias showing, but you're somebody who's biased against the Packers. So maybe I'm about to like break some glass for you and you'll see this. I find it amazing that like it was completely presumed that Mike McCarthy would be a disaster without Aaron Rodgers. But that like with Matt LaFleur, it's like, oh well, I don't know. Like we assigned all of the success that Mike McCarthy had with Aaron Rodgers to Aaron Rodgers, but we're willing to like divide it when it comes to the Matt LaFleur era. I find that very fascinating.
That is kind of interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I know. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't fault you for it, but I think there's some of your like, I think the Packers are your boogeyman, and I think so. You're like willing to give them like some credit that may not be real. You know what I mean? Like, I think I understand the high variance on the Vikings. I understand the one score games last year. I understand all of that. Again, if we like, they have the best quarterback in the division right now. They really do.
Yeah.
The Vikings do. Like that counts for something. So like for them to not be like the team you're most afraid of is like, I think, ridiculous. But again, if you're like that's some of your like, I hate that people do that with the Browns and the Lions, like same old Vikings type thing, same old Kirk Cousins, whatever. But I do think it's interesting that the Bears are this like, I don't know if I'm afraid of them yet. Like you really, when was the last time I was going to ask you this, that the Bears offense was like, whoa? Because I think I know my answer, but I'm curious what yours is.
Man, I don't know. Like they're a franchise known for not having a quarterback, right? There was a time in which Jay Cutler was okay.
I was gonna say the Mark Trestman year.
No.
No. And I remember that. Like I remember the beating the Cowboys took there on Monday Night Football in 2013 when it was like 1 degree outside or whatever. But that wasn't even Jay Cutler that night. That was Josh McCown. And that was like the peak of like Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey, and Matt Forte was still kind of doing his thing.
Right.
Like that was, I have to imagine that was a frightful time. You know what I mean? They still didn't win the division, but I mean, whatever. But the Trubisky Bears were never great.
No. And it's always been about their defense, right? And that's what the problem is right now. It's the opposite. Like their offense has some potential. Again, potential, nothing proven. Their defense, I think, is still very much a mess. And so they're going to be at the end of a lot of shootouts, and I just don't know if they're ready to keep up with all those.
The comp, though, I know you use Jared Goff, like, oh, surround him with weapons. Like, I hate to do this, but like the comp really is Jalen Hurts. Like the running ability that we saw without any sort of talent around him. Now you give like, I guess like DJ Moore is to Justin Fields what AJ Brown was to Jalen Hurts. Like, not that they're the same, but like that's the same sort of effect. I think
that's the concept. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we agree that the Bears are number 3. So that means I'm up for number 2.
Yes.
I can't believe that I'm doing this. All right. Like I'm really, really, really stunned. I think like, so this has come down to the Jets and the Falcons. I think the Falcons have to be number 2.
Yeah.
Now neither of us really like Aaron Rodgers. We can get to that in a moment, but this is about something else for me. But the Falcons are number 2 here because the division stinks. Like there is nobody here. Like the Falcons could and on paper, I mean, Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, I think we forget, you know what I mean? Like there's gonna be a lot of 12 personnel rolling around Atlanta.
Drake London's a good player.
What's that?
Drake London is a good player.
I was getting there. Drake London, like their offense, and now Bijan Robinson, like I don't agree with the methodology of drafting a running back in the first round. I don't know what stupid team would do that this year outside of the Atlanta Falcons.
Probably just them. I can't imagine there's another team.
Right. But like I will say the initial bump is awesome. Like the Zeke Elliott 2016 season, like if that happens to the Falcons or the Lions, obviously, like, I mean, like you can ride that. And so I don't really believe in Desmond Ridder, but like, if we're talking about like, all you got to do is like drive the bus, like he is in that position. The Falcons do have a sneaky roster. I think the Lions have become too vogue to be like the sneaky pick. You know what I mean? The Falcons are going to be like a lot of people's sneaky pick to win the division.
Yeah, I think most of their questions, I mean, outside of quarterback, are really on the defensive side of the ball. They were horrible at it last year. arguably the worst, although statistically I think not the worst. But they did add a couple of interesting names that I think could really help out the unit immediately. You get Jesse Bates from Cincy, one of the best safeties in the league. Calais Campbell, for some reason, chose to go to Atlanta. And then, like, I'll even throw Jeff Okudah as like kind of an intriguing addition. You know, given that he doesn't have to be CB1 there, maybe a change of scenery helps him out and helps the Falcons. But yeah, again, like I think this is all about the division. So they've got plus 250 to win the division, which is actually the best amongst all 8 of these teams. The Saints are currently the favorite at plus 115 per DraftKings Sportsbook. I have a third team actually winning the division. I think the Carolina Panthers are quite possibly the best team in this division because, again, we're talking rookie quarterback, Bryce Young, whatever. But they have a really solid run game. I think their defense is pretty darn good. If I were a betting man, that'd probably be the team I'd put the money on. But Falcons are very much in this conversation because, and I think maybe the main point here is like, who are the quarterbacks in this division? Like, who are you scared of that's going to tear apart your defense in this division?
Derek Carr. That's the answer. I mean, but like, it's not a good one,
right? Exactly.
I agree with you. The Panthers are in the rare, not the worst team in the NFL to have the number 1 overall pick. Like that's always an interesting thing. Like you always say like, oh, the rookie quarterback like Trevor Lawrence. Like it just takes some time because the roster's so bad. Panthers not exactly in that situation. I'd be a little bit more in on them with DJ Moore, which obviously lends to my somewhat belief in the Bears, obviously.
Sure.
But so I'm not a fan of like I keep bringing up the mixtape, but like. I think it was 2 years ago now. Ron Rivera was talking about what was he talking about? He was talking about like running backs and things like that, and whatever the case may be. And it was like, oh well, we're gonna be like just like it was when they signed Curtis Samuel, and like that's what it was like. And people were like, oh well, watch out, like he's gonna be amazing. It's like, well, just because the same like coach and player are in a new different city doesn't mean they're going to be the exact same combination of what they were in their old city. Like Curtis Samuel with the Commanders isn't going to be what he was with the Panthers. And so I think that's dumb. I do think this is a cousin of that in a good way where like, I do think Arthur Smith has slowly remade his dominant Titans offense, but like with different people, you know what I'm saying? He hasn't like, I recognize Jonnu Smith is there, but like he's kind of brought so his last season in Tennessee, Arthur Smith was his offensive coordinator. It was 2020. Obviously, the comp between Bijan and Derrick Henry is there. So he's got his like workhorse, bell cow running back, whatever.
Yep.
I don't think it would be like impossible to believe that Bijan would have that year was Derrick Henry's 2,000-yard season. So that might be a little generous, but he could have like an 1,800-yard season. I don't think that either of us would be shocked by that. The top 3 receivers from a reception standpoint on the Titans that year: AJ Brown, Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith. Could you not see, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Jonnu Smith having that effect? You know what I mean? Like being like this version of that. Like I could totally see that. Like I kind of trust that in a division that stinks, like the 2020 AFC South, which they won.
But I mean, the question is, can Desmond Ridder be the guy that manages all of that?
Can he be so like the big,
can he be
like,
Tannehill?
That's what I'm saying. The bar declares, can you be Ryan Tannehill? Like, you know what I mean? Like
that's still a tough bar for a second year guy, right? Like part of the thing that made Ryan Tannehill good was just he didn't make mistakes. And for a young quarterback, that's the biggest hurdle to have. So if they had Ryan Tannehill, I think I'd have a lot more confidence in this team, which is, I know, a silly thing it sounds silly, but when you have just a young guy, the biggest thing that really is your hurdle to being good is making too many mistakes. And so I don't have a lot of confidence in Desmond Ridder. I don't know how anyone can have a lot of confidence in such a small sample size of what we've seen from him, but 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions in 4 games. Like that's all we have to work with. So
but
I don't know.
You said it, 0 interceptions. So like,
That's
can
true.
you be that
Lots
guy?
of
Can you not turn the ball over? Like that's really what this comes down to. And like,
true.
Again, is that going to win you the Super Bowl? I don't think so, but like it could totally win you the NFC South, which is like the point
100%.
of the discussion we're having here. So that means the team who we agree is most likely to go from worst to first is the New York Jets. Now this is obviously about Aaron Rodgers. All right. Really nothing else for me, but like that's a big time factor. We've both been burned badly by Aaron Rodgers many times in the past. This to me is really more about the Buffalo Bills. All right. Now, I was listening this morning. I took my son to daycare and was getting my wife a coffee. Not trying to brag, but you know, good
Sit
job,
right.
me. Right. And I was finishing up the most recent episode of the Around the NFL podcast. I want to give a shout out to Andrew Siciliano because Andrew's the only person who I've heard agree with me. He called I don't know, have you listened to the recent episode of ATN?
I have not yet, no.
Well, he referred to the Bills as being desperate. And it's funny because I was listening to that episode as I got the Bills signing Leonard Floyd notification on my phone. So, okay, cool. Whoa, I'm super scared. The Bills have acted like I used to say this about the Cowboys after Dez caught it, which he caught it. Absolutely. I used to say that the Cowboys built their team in 2015 like they could pick back up where Dez caught it at Lambeau Field. And you can't. Like you don't just get to like go back to where your last season ended. You have to climb the mountain all over again. And the Bills, to me, are acting the exact same way as the 2015 Cowboys, thinking like you can pick back up there. They have done what have the Bills done? The Bills have completely and totally let Aaron Rodgers come inhabit their house and let the Jets. Like the Jets are acting like the desperate team, and we can make fun of them and laugh at them and how silly it was and how ridiculous it was that they catered to Aaron Rodgers. But you know what? They're a better team. Like they really are. Like, are the Bills a better team in your mind than they were when they got blown out by the Bengals in the divisional round? No. And the Jets are. So like I could totally see the Jets coming for them.
These two teams split last year, by the way. Like the Jets took the one at home.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And listen, this Jets team is decent, right? I know they lost their last 6 games of the season last year, and that is what it is. But this is a team with a top 5 defense already, right? This is a team with superstars on defensive side of the ball in Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. And they're built young too. And that's part of the reason why I didn't quite understand getting Aaron Rodgers. Like, you're building slowly for the future. This, like, take your time. Don't push all your chips in right away because you have Garrett Wilson, because you have Breece Hall, a guy who they didn't have for the rest of the season, which could kind of play into why they struggled so much down the stretch. But he's got weapons, man. Aaron Rodgers has got weapons. I know Allen Lazard is maybe kind of a punchline for some people, but with Garrett Wilson, with, again, Randall Cobb, that's right. Breece Hall as well. I do think this is a decent all-around team that should go really toe-to-toe with the Bills. I'm less down on the Bills than you and maybe Pete are. But they're, I still think they are a very good football team, and I don't really understand the Josh slander that sometimes happens on the show. But to me, I think the Jets have closed a gap that was already probably smaller than people were giving it credit for. So I think these teams are, like, I would put their odds at winning the division even almost at this point, because I do think both teams are pretty darn good top to bottom.
I love Josh Allen, but the only reason I hate him is because I used to feel like Matt Ryan was Tony Romo without the flack. And so I hated Matt Ryan for that. Like I hated that he didn't get the criticism that my quarterback got.
Matt Ryan.
Well, and so,
like,
and
I've only ever in the world.
I've only ever been to one Super Bowl, like one game. My dad and I went to Super Bowl 51. And so, like, when it was 20-3, like, I was bartering like you have no idea. Like, I was like, look, he deserves it. Like, it's like, but I, like, in my head, I was like, of course, the one Super Bowl I'll go to in my life will be like this dude. So I owe Tom Brady a huge debt of gratitude. But but like, that was my logic as a fan, like, and hating him, was that he was the same guy as Tony Romo without the flack. And Josh Allen is Dak Prescott in that same way. Like, he's the same dude, and he's the same wildly talented dude. Like, I have nothing to really be mad about in terms of his skills. I think he's enormously talented, but he's the same guy without the flack. Like, nobody wants to, like, pick apart Josh Allen's turnovers. Nobody wants to talk about him throwing away games. Nobody wants to think about, Jeremy, if any other quarterback had fumbled on the 1 yard line the way he did against the Vikings, if Jared Goff had
fluky, man,
but that's so fluky. How many fluky things happen to other quarterbacks that they get destroyed for? Like, my point is, like, maybe I'm just jealous that Josh Allen is, like, Teflon proof, but, like, if anything, to me, that's an indication at how little the national media really cares about the Bills. Like, and the Falcons, for that matter. Like, if the national media cares about you, they will tear you apart. A lesson you will unfortunately probably learn this coming season, but that will be an indication that you've made it, and that's something that you should really kind of wear as a badge of honor. That being said, by the way, Josh Allen, there's, like, a lot of chatter on the internet that, like, he could be the Madden cover athlete, so, like, watch out. But anyway, so, like, let's look at it this way: of all the first and last place teams, I do think that, like, I agree with you that the Jets probably already had the smallest gap. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we look at the gap between the Browns and the Bengals, the Texans and the Jaguars, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they already have the smallest gap, and they have done more work to close it than anybody else, except maybe the Bears, right? Like, the Bears have done a lot of, although their work is like a little bit more future related as it relates to draft capital. But like, so yeah, like, how could you not pick the Jets? And that's like, a lot of the reason the gap closed is because the Bills did nothing. I mean, they did absolutely nothing. Think about, like, the Eagles won their division and they did a lot of work to maintain that lead. The Niners won their division and they signed Javon Hargrave. Like, why do the Bills think they're good? That's dumb to me.
I mean, to me, they've won the division 3 years in a row. I think they deserve at least a little bit of respect for that.
That's their Super Bowl, dude. That's really, because remember when they like didn't, when Andy Dalton sent them to the playoffs and they were like, oh, we're good. Like, that's the Bills Super Bowl.
Okay,
we hosted some playoff games.
They've also won 4 playoff games in the past 3 years. They're averaging one in the 30 year. That's more than some of these teams that just end up winning their division.
Do we want to pick these apart? Okay, they beat for real. They beat the Skylar. They barely beat the Skylar Thompson led Dolphins last year. That was their one playoff one.
Yep.
Okay.
And then they get smoked by the Bengals. Fair.
Right. In 2021, they beat the Mac Jones Patriots. They blasted them. Again, not exactly like, whoa, massive, whatever. Then in 2020, they barely beat the Colts in the wild card round, and everybody was really upset with Frank Reich for the way that game ended. And then they beat the Ravens. Again, Rachel, I'm a Ravens fan here. 17-3 to get to the AFC Championship game, which they lost. And then in 2019, they lost to the Texans, right? That was their playoff appearance. I mean, so like what is the playoff win they have that you're like, man, that is super impressive?
There isn't one. I'll openly admit, but doesn't matter. Like, they still won the games that they were supposed to, and we're not even talking about winning playoff games, right? We're talking about winning the division. And to me, they're still on top. They still have a top 5 quarterback in the league, and I'm not sure Aaron Rodgers is still that. Like, that's the other thing. Like, where's Aaron Rodgers' career going right now? Is it really ascending at this point? Is there really reason to believe that he's going to be more comfortable in New York than he was in Green Bay?
No, I do think that Aaron is like trying to be something he wasn't, right? Like, oh, I'll hold your hand in public, oh yeah, I'll read this book with you. Oh yeah, you know what I mean? Like, he's really trying to be like, but you know what? Like, that's a conscious effort. I hate Aaron Rodgers, but like, I will give him respect for like, for real, like trying to be better. Like, that's an indication that he's trying to be better than he was. And we can sit here and lament him for like things getting as bad as they did in Green Bay, but he is actively, consciously trying to be better. And that terrifies me as somebody whose life has been tormented by this man. So I will give him credit for that. And the way we talked about the non-zero quantity that like being the Browns or the Lions or whoever has, it's also a non-zero quantity what like the Aaron Rodgers, like Michael Secret stuff does to your team. You know what I mean? Like, you suddenly believe, like, you suddenly have Aaron freaking Rodgers on your team. Like, if we do see a similar impact, Russell Wilson's obviously the like horrible example, but to Tom Brady in Tampa, to the aforementioned Peyton Manning in Denver, to Drew Brees in New Orleans, to a much lesser extent, like, if the badass veteran quarterback comes in and like ups the ante a little bit, then yeah, this totally happens for them. They may not win the Super Bowl, but they totally win the AFC East.
My question is, how much will he play nice when like the first bit of turbulence happens? Because it's easy to be Mr. Nice Guy right now when there's no turbulence. There's no bad news. You're not losing any games. If a guy drops a pass in OTAs, no one gives a crap, right? But once you get closer to the start of the season, maybe training camp, and something isn't happening and it should be happening by then, that's when I want to see how much Aaron Rodgers plays nice, because I just don't know. And the New York media is going to be all over him too, right? Like, that's a whole nother beast. And you can say maybe that's an overplayed stereotype of whether that impacts a player or not. It certainly seemed to impact a guy like Kenny Galladay. But I just wonder, like, how much of this ruse will last if the Jets don't start out hot.
I agree with you, but let me paint you the worst possible picture imaginable for you and I, but more specifically for me. So week 1, Jets host the Bills, Monday Night Football, right?
Mm-hmm.
Jets win. Super annoying, right? Like all time annoying for you and me, right? Like, oh, because like it will be this like, oh my gosh, and this will feed the like idea that we're talking about here. And then week 2, do you know who the Jets play week 2?
I don't. Please tell me.
They visit the Cowboys, the house that Aaron Rodgers has never lost in. Mike McCarthy, et cetera, et cetera. They won the Super Bowl together in that building. And so, like, again, I want to focus on the fact that he's never lost in the building. Okay. So Aaron Rodgers comes to town. They win their first game. They beat the reigning division champions who have won it 3 years in a row, whatever. And then they go to Dallas and they win again, right? In the house that Aaron Rodgers did. And that feeds the idea that, like, that's me. Like, that's who I am. I'm the guy who doesn't lose to the Cowboys. Like, that feeds the legend. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, if they're 2-0, like, that would be a horrible reality. But, like, it's very possible. Like, I could totally see that happen.
Sure. Well, I mean, and this sort of thing happened.
I have a lot of insecurity about this. If this isn't obvious, like, I really.
Do you remember last year when the Jets and Giants were like the 2 hottest teams in football, in through the first 2 months of the season, and it was the most obnoxious thing in sports media I've ever experienced? It could happen again.
It was tough. It was really tough. And yeah, it could totally happen. Like, I really bummed myself out here. Like, I don't know why we wanted to do this. This was not fun. But if it leads to the demise of the Bills, I'm almost in. You know what I mean? For that, like, I kind of want to see the Bills fall.
I think that's been made abundantly clear this entire offseason.
I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry that I'm more willing to be honest about teams in the NFL than you are. Speaking of honesty, it's time for Rachel to come in. And Rachel, we would like you to tell us who you think will go from worst to first, who you think is most likely. And then, of course, what you think about what we had to say. If you want to share something you're insecure about, like Jeremy and I with Aaron Rodgers, that's up to you. But of course, we would love to hear who won the MFL
MVP. I feel like I was kind of on the same page with most of the stuff that you guys said. I thought that the Cardinals was an easy pick to, start things off. I thought that the Commanders, that was really, really strong as well. The only one that I feel like was the biggest question mark, which I think MFL MVP comes down to today, was the Browns and the Texans. And so on this one, I'm going to have to disagree with Jeremy.
Oh,
I also agree with RJ's point 100%. I just don't really have as much confidence when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. I have more confidence in the Steelers, going from number 3 to 1 than I would see the Browns. I just like every point that he hit on when it comes to Watson, when it comes to the supporting cast, I stand 100%. I just can't see it happening compared to, with the Houston Texans. So that's what it really came down to. Everything else was pretty solid. You kind of agreed on the same stuff. And so I did like your pick when you talked about the Panthers. I was on the same page with you. I'm higher on them, but of course,
pity props.
Yeah, I got to give you your props for that. I like the point at the end, just the question that you presented towards the end about Aaron Rodgers and when the turbulence, comes up, how is he going to be able to respond? Because he is such a diva. But it really just came down to the Browns versus the Texans pick. And so for today's award, I'm going to give it to RJ.
I want you to remember Rachel's words, Jeremy. She said every point he hit on. That's what she said. Those are her exact words. Did you hear that?
This is the Ravens fandom slipping in, I feel like.
No. Not at all.
I want to thank Rachel. I want to thank the Spice Girls for allowing me to pick Stop for our NFC East mixtape playlist pick last week, Rachel. I want to thank the Strokes for a song that Jeremy had never heard of in Reptilia. And I want to thank Rachel again for picking Ain't It Fun by Paramore. Really popular trend on TikTok right now. I don't know if that's what was in your brain when you picked the Rachel, but it was a solid pick by you.
I didn't even know that.
It's a really popular... It's a good vibe. Like, I will totally agree. Yes. I'm gonna spoil my pick for you right now. I'm gonna pick Untouched by the Veronicas. That's gonna be my pick this week. It's a great song. It's like if you're on the treadmill and you want to like up the speed a little bit, throw on Untouched by the Veronicas. I know Jeremy hits his Just Dance to that song.
I just listened to Reptilia, by the way, and I absolutely know that song.
Yeah, it's really common. Like, again, like that's like you being like Mr. Brightside by the Killers. What's that? Like, that's kind of what you said.
They say that in the song, though.
Oh, that's a good point. Wow. They actually say that a lot, which is really stupid.
They sure do.
But it's a lot more forgivable to say the name of a song than it is to say the name of a movie. Or the worst is to say the name of an episode title in a show. That's when you're really trying way too hard. So don't be like that, television or movies. Wow. Seriously, thank you to everyone. Thank you again to Rachel. Thank you to Jeremy for putting up a semi-worthy fight. And for, having a misstep. You know what I mean? I pounced. And I'm not sorry. That's what it takes. Somebody has to have a misstep for you to go from worst to first. That's what I did.
But you won last week, didn't you? Or 2 weeks ago? So I was supposed to go worst to first. That was like that. It was built up for me to win the show.
So he's
and then
criticizing you, Rachel, for not
No,
keeping
no.
themes,
Okay.
copacetic. Remember that next week that Jeremy
I will.
openly and ferociously criticized you.
Let's just hope there's not a Baltimore Ravens take that
Oh
influences
my
the decision.
gosh.
Jeremy, as we leave, I would like for you to explain to our podcast audience
Mhm.
what you're drinking out of. I don't know if Rachel's had the same questions that I have, but you have like a green screen effect behind you,
Yeah.
and your cup is like floating. So I don't know if your cup is like a lime green as well. Like, can you explain what the cup is, what's in the cup? Because it's been very distracting for me, which I powered through and still want to
I'm sorry.
MF in spite of.
Yeah, no, it's just a green cup. I have a green screen behind me, as some people know, but it's just water. Nothing too exciting. There was a splash of cranberry juice in there this morning, but now just going straight water. Hydration. It's hot out there, folks.
Yum.
I have a question for both of you, and then we can go. I was talking to the boss man, Michael Kiss, last week, and he explained to me that he puts like a handful of ice in his water, which I really disagree with. Like, I don't want it to be that cold. I don't want the like clinky sound of the ice and stuff. But we were talking about people who bite ice cream or popsicles. Do
Ooh.
either of you do that?
No, I hate popsicles for that exact reason. Like,
Yeah,
I thinking about chomping into a popsicle sends chills down my spine.
like
I hate
the
You have to wait.
Yes.
You have to
Oh.
wait until it starts to melt and it gets kind like midway through. It gets kind of soft, but that's very painful.
So the three of us and Kist are on the same page. I was telling him my wife is somebody who like she like bites into her ice cream and like she'll like bite a popsicle like it's
Ooh.
like
Okay. If it's like an orange like creamsicle type of thing, I could do that because it's not as hard as like
it's still freezing though.
it's
Like
still freezing, but I could do that because there's like the cream, which kind of offsets. I don't know. That's better.
no, she'll like the example I'm really thinking of is like a drumstick, like some sort of ice cream that has like a coating. She'll
Right.
but like I still won't do that. Like I'll softly puncture it with my like mouth. I don't like biting into it, since chills down my spine. I can't do it. That's weird to me that people do that. So at least all of us are on the same page.
RJ
Jeremy?
just outing that his wife is a freak.
I mean, she loves me. That's one of her, plus or minus qualities, depending on
Yeah.
how you feel about
Red
me.
flag immediately.
Exactly.
Dang.
As we leave, Jeremy, tell us your 3 favorite types of frozen treats to not bite.
I am a big flurry fan. So any kind of flurry, I would say if it's got cheesecake bites in it, that probably elevates it. So like a cheesecake bite flurry is number 1. Oh man, I was gonna say Choco Taco, but you have to pretty aggressively bite into one of those, so I guess that doesn't count. I would say like a creamsicle. I would just like I'd let that melt, and I wouldn't want to chew on that. I'd let that just lick it up.
Good call.
And then I feel like I don't eat a lot of frozen treats. How about I was gonna say ice cream sandwich, but you bite into those too.
See, like when you say bite, I use like my lips to bite. Like I cover it like
Gum 'em?
yeah, like
Wait,
that's what I'm saying.
wait.
Like I don't use my actual teeth to bite these things. Like I kind of like protect my teeth with my mouth, with my lips. Like
You
I'm
literally like gum it almost.
yeah, because again, like
Messy.
if it's an ice cream. Like I understand that it's going to be a mess going into it, but like if I will experience discomfort if I put my teeth on ice cream. I don't want anything to do with it.
Interesting.
How about just a hot fudge sundae? We'll throw that as number 3.
Then that's
Nice.
it.